Oh, hello. Uh, she's way too quick, Kenny. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. Hope you're having a phenomenal week. And so, Kenny, how you doing there?
I'm good over here. Well, good-ish. It hurts losing two in a row to the Mets.
Well, so let's start there. You know, you and I have been really good on this. We never trash talk, and I'm not going to start now because there it's been such up and downs in this Subway Series, right? There's been years where the Mets have been terrible, and they'll take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. I think when we went, the Mets were bad that year, and I think they took like 3 out of 4 that week. I think Marlon Bird just like hit home runs every night. You
Yeah.
know, Ike Davis. I mean, it was I'm really careful not to trash talk here because I do think, as much as I love my Mets, I still think the Yankees are the best team in baseball, and I think they got a little bit better last night. But what are 2 or 3 takeaways from the Subway Series?
I think first of all, the Mets are a really good team. I think one of the guys that continues to get overlooked as far as MVP goes is Pete Alonso. I thought I had known this, but it's kind of going back and forth between him and Judge leading the league in RBIs. And I know, especially with a lot of like the newer writers and stuff, RBIs is a little bit of an archaic stat, but still Pete Alonso has been a huge difference maker in that team.
Yeah.
I mean, probably overall, the biggest difference maker is probably Buck Showalter. I mean, I don't know if he'll end up winning Manager of the Year. I think he probably should.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's my first one. The Mets, they're a very good team. Next, it looks like the Yankees are like, there's a couple of concerns that I have kind of moving forward. They're not big concerns, especially when the playoffs happen because rotations look different. The starting pitching hasn't been great the last like month or so.
Right.
Montgomery and Tyone have both kind of hit walls at the same time. Everyone else has kind of had hiccups here and there. But I just think they need another arm. Severino, you could tell that he's not there. And hopefully he'll be healthy soon. Something that I thought was kind of interesting that someone suggested was having him in as, instead of coming back as a starter, coming back kind of in the role that he came last year, like 2-3 inning reliever, which would be very, very helpful with the injuries that we've had recently there.
Yeah.
Also, I think another bullpen arm's needed. People might criticize, because they kind of mentioned it on the broadcast yesterday, they might criticize putting Clay Holmes in the 8th inning versus the 9th inning. I don't have a problem with it, because you had your best pitcher against the best hitters. I think that's what you need. Especially like, it wasn't like Wandy Peralta was trying to save the game in the 9th inning. Like, tied game in the 9th inning, you're not going to bring in your closer on the road anyway. So I don't think that was a big issue. But you could tell the bullpen's a little thin right now. Castro, maybe he'll be back mid-August, September. Zach Britton might also show up there too.
That'll be big. Yeah.
But losing Michael King was a huge blow. I think also just in general, like you could kind of feel like the team really feel for him, which kind of tells that they really they held him in highest regard. So
yeah, no doubt. Let me ask you about Aaron Boone though, in a few moves, because my only criticism of Aaron Boone over the 3-4 years, right? Is it 4 years that he's been the manager, that he tends to overmanage, I think, a couple of times. And especially I thought in the postseason at times. Joey Gallo in the first game, instead of kind of I mean, Gallo had no shot, against Edwin Diaz. I mean, that move really surprised me. I just thought he was just going for the home run to tie it there, but you could still have a rally. The Yankees have such clutch players. Did that move surprise you as well?
Oh yeah. Like I understand kind of trying to keep Gallo fresh and all, but especially now, I don't understand why this guy isn't just riding the bench. like Kiner Falefa has had, I think it's a 13-game hitting streak or something like that. Like he has been red hot, especially since July turned around. And
Yeah.
like to me, that's not the type of like, yes, Kiner Falefa, he hasn't hit a home run all year. I'm still waiting the John Sterling call on his name. I think it'll be interesting. But like he's not a power hitter, but he's been really good. Like he's a guy that's kind of figured out what his role is, and it's just singles, doubles, hit it in the gap
Good
type of
player.
guy.
Yeah, he's a very good
Yeah.
player. Yeah. That surprised me. And by the way, before we get this has nothing to do with anything. I'll tell you the quick full story because I heard this on the Mets radio cat because I was out yesterday. Got home maybe I think I texted you, it was around the fourth inning. Kind of for left, I had no idea he's fourth cousin of Ralph Kiner. It's amazing. His dad is, and he never got to meet Ralph Kiner. His first game was 2007. Ralph Kiner's Met Hall of Fame enshrinement ceremony, and
Oh wow.
they never got him down to the field to meet him. Obviously, he was young at the time, so he never did. But his dad met him several times, and so they're very distant cousins. But I never thought Kiner. I figured it's his last name. He's related to Ralph Kiner. That's amazing. All right, so the move last night. I questioned it once the Yankees tied it in the eighth inning. I thought, maybe you save Holmes for the ninth inning. And I agree with you. There's not a save there. And it was really nice. And I'll tell you my takeaways in a second. But one of them is just really nice to get a national TV perspective both nights, on how kind of the nation perceives both these teams who are both obviously very good. I thought now once they tied it, they would have brought in Peralta to pitch the eighth. But I do understand the logic there. Like I wouldn't kill him on that move, although I might have brought in Peralta in the eighth inning and saved Holmes for the ninth in case, especially in case the Yankees went ahead. If the Yankees had went ahead in the top of the ninth, you know what I mean? Then I've got my guy coming in to shut it down. And that's just me. But I don't think it was a terrible move because the game was on the line right there in the eighth inning. I mean, here's my take. These games had a postseason feel. 100% sellout.
Yeah.
The crowd was so into it. It was really exciting. You felt the excitement on TV, and that kind of been a little bit of a throwback on these Subway Series, right? Because this is how these got so popular because the fans got so into it, and the other one I just said, you had, obviously the Mets must have told Ron Darling, nope, you're not doing this one, man. You're doing the SNY one. You're not, because he does the TBS Tuesdays and Sundays. He's never on the Met games on Tuesdays and Sundays, because it's rare. Like when Keith Hernandez was out, he was on Sundays, but that's a great team with him and Bob Costas. But it was Bob Costas and Jeff Francoeur. But Jeff Francoeur has grown on me a little bit, But Costas is such a classic throwback announcer. He's still very good at what he does. Costas got to be up there in age a little bit, but he's still sharp as a tack, very witty. And it's just such a good perspective that he had on both these teams, So did Francoeur. And then last night, getting the Sunday night crew with David Cone. David Cone is so good, man, Eduardo Perez has always been steady. He ever since he's been an announcer, he's pretty steady. And Carl Ravage is almost the perfect play-by-play guy because for years he was the Baseball Tonight guy, so he knows how to spur that conversation with them. And they added some really good insight. And as an example, they both kind of disagreed in the eighth inning last night. Perez felt like bringing in Holmes was the right move, and Cone didn't. And obviously, Cone is has a little bit more perspective on the Yankees, since he's the Yankee announcer. My last takeaway, I think the Mets have stepped up in these big games here so far. The big series against the Braves. This was obviously a big series, and they've been struggling scoring runs of late, and they finally turned that around a little bit in that last Sunday night game against the Padres. And it looks like their offense is coming back a little bit, but what I like more is they seem to now thrive on the big stage here a little bit, which tells me if they get into the postseason that the bright lights won't bother them, because they're
Yeah.
playing some big games here. And they're going to listen. They're going to, I think it's a 3-game lead this morning, right, against the Braves. They're going to have some, the Braves aren't going away. I mean, this is going to be quite a series with the two of them coming up here, a 5-game series. And I think it's just going to be a race right till the end with the both of them. So I think that's to the advantage of the Mets. The last quick thing I'll say, I love how, I didn't realize this. I love how every time Aaron Judge comes up, all the Yankees fans stand up. I didn't know that. They've been doing that, I guess, all season. I knew they did that when he took the field, right? They have the judges' chambers, or they have the people that bring robes to the game out there, and I guess they're doing it in center field now because they used to do it in right field. But I thought that was pretty cool back then, and they would sit, after first pitch. I didn't realize now every time he comes up, he's an exciting player. But man, oh man, Scherzer had his number last night, and that was seeing Scherzer go 7 not hitless, scoreless innings, and he got into trouble several times, and he pitched his way out of it. That showed me that the postseason Max Scherzer is ready here in July, and then seeing him just slapping the high fives in the dugout, he's hurting people's hands. Was just. It was good. It was fun. It was it was almost like those series in the late 90s when both teams were good, when the Mets got good with Bobby Valentine and they had the rivalry. Oh, Roger Clemens, Mike Piazza, and I thought it had lost some of its luster. I mean, some of the games over the last several years hadn't been sellouts, but now you got two first place teams battling it out. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. But I'm glad the Mets won both of them, but I'm not going to listen. They got 2 more coming up, right, in Yankee Stadium. And, I'm not going to brag or anything like that, man. You and I have never done that, so I ain't going to start now. I'm just happy to get out of town with a couple of wins.
Yeah. And honestly, like for me, it kind of stinks that they didn't win the games, but it all matters in October. Like, not gonna lie, I'd love to see the World Series matchup.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if the rest of the country would like it, but yeah, that it would be fun. Now, was Brian Cashman sitting by the phone once they lost? It's like, all right, let's pull the trigger on this. So talk a little bit about this big trade they made, because I think this is a really, really key trade, for them.
Yeah. So they do get Benintendi from the Royals. I'll start out with this. They start out a 4-game series against the Royals. Today,
I know,
so that's kind of interesting.
That's gonna be a little bit strange. But go ahead.
It reminds me of when they got Ichiro. It was right when they were playing Seattle. So I believe he played 1 game with Seattle and the rest with the Yankees.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great trade. Gold Glove caliber fielder out there, which like their fielding hasn't been bad. Stanton's been good. Judge has been great. Hicks has been pretty good too. Having the left-handed bat also helps. Essentially, this guy is replacing Gallo, and I know it's still with the Royals, but he was an all-star this year. He's greatly improved. So I love the move. I think it was a move that they needed to make. I think like it's time to admit that Joey Gallo was a bad trade. It's hard to kind of say that, but like, because at the time it looked like it was a great trade, but now you're looking like Joey Gallo's been awful this year. There were times last year where he looked absolutely lost. He seems like one of those guys that like just doesn't do well in New York. I don't know what it is. But I think Benintendi will be fine. One of the bigger concerns was his vaccination status. I think it was John Heyman that said it, that he's planning on getting vaccinated, because the Yankees do have 1 more series in Toronto. And then they also, there's also the possibility of playing Toronto in the playoffs. So that's kind of one of those things where it's like, it shouldn't be as important as it is, but like, especially for like AL East teams, whether you're vaccinated or not can really kind of determine whether or not you should go for a guy. Because, like, let's say you do have a division series and you're facing Toronto twice in Toronto, like, you'd
Yeah.
hate to lose a guy that's a big
Gotta
part
have
of
all
your
your
lineup.
guys. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's a great move. I think it's the move that they really needed to make. He's batting 320 this year, so like having him right in the middle of that lineup, I think will really help. The Stanton injury is mildly concerning to me because he kind of asked for an MRI.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's just kind of like a 15 days he'll be back type of thing. But I think having that outfield with Benintendi, Judge, and Hicks for the next few weeks, I think will be really good. Adding Stanton in the mix there, I think will also really help it. It just makes the lineup a lot deeper. I really like the move. I think it's a good move for them.
Yeah, I texted you this morning. I think it's a great move. I really do. He's a really good player, and I understand the Royals trading him, right? Because he's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. So they probably just felt like, hey, we're not going to be able to sign him. I'm surprised they let him go this quick and not held on because they probably could have got a few more chips. But obviously, they're looking towards the future. Kansas City, I guess they got 3 minor league pitchers, right, for him.
Yeah.
He's going to fit in extremely well in that lineup. He's an excellent fielder. He's got speed. Like you said, batting 320. He's an all-star this year. He's used to the big stage in his years with the Red Sox. I think he's going to fit right in like a glove with this team. I think it was a great move. I was just surprised that the Royals let him go. It's still a few more days till the trade deadline, right? It's August 2nd, right? So I thought they might have held out because they would have definitely been teams that would have wanted him, But kudos to the Yankees for pulling it off. Timing couldn't have been better, right? And so that leads me to the trade deadline, right? And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the big names, obviously, and we don't know anything. I think a lot of these insiders do know what they're talking about, right? The Ken Rosenthal's, John Heyman's, but who knows, what's gonna, happen here. But I want to ask you a question before we get into Juan Soto and Ohtani. I don't know the thinking of the Guardians there, and that's where I want to get your insight. But also reading that the Marlins are looking to trade some of their good young players, like a Garrett Cooper, another all-star, this year. And I guess if I'm building a team, if especially a guys that I know I have control of, in terms of salary for at least a few more years, guys like Garrett Cooper and Brian Anderson and Jazz Chisholm, another all-star, he just didn't get to play. I mean, those are guys that I would think I would keep so that I can, build around them. And now we're talking about the Guardians' best pitcher that they're looking to, to trade. And so I don't understand when these young teams, I can understand. So I'll use this example because I jotted down the Nationals, right? I think the Nationals got Nelson Cruz in the offseason for one reason, to get some prospects for him at the trade deadline. Now, Nelson Cruz is not doing that well, but there's going to be some teams that are going to want him because they know that you throw him on a contender, he's going to come up in a big spot and hit a big home run. He just is. He does that all the time. He's done that for years and years. And that'll be worth it. And so I can totally understand someone like that. I don't understand some of these younger guys that they still control salary-wise. So what's the deal with, let's start with the Guardians, since I'm sure you've read about what they're doing there. And the Guardians are contending. The Guardians are not far out of it, right?
No, that's what I was going to start with. So they're a game and a half out of the Central.
Game and a half.
Behind. And also 2.5 out of the wild card spot. So, like, they're really not out of the race at all. To me, if anything, Guardians should be looking to add something. They had 3 all-stars this year. I know, like, we keep talking like, oh, yeah, that guy was an all-star. But, like, they have guys that are really good players. Yeah. And it does kind of seem like that's kind of their move a lot of times is, like, we're going to keep a guy until he's getting kind of close to free agency, and then we're gonna flip him for prospects. And usually, like, they're pretty good with their prospects. Like, you look at their farm system, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand why not just keep him. I mean, Jose Ramirez is kind of the first guy that they've actually like kept. I mean, they traded Lindor, they traded Kluber before he started getting hurt. Like, I think, yeah, like you got to keep these guys. Because like you want Shane Bieber to start a game one of a wild card series, or if you make it to the division series, you want him there. The Marlins to me is a little bit more perplexing too. Because like, I mean, the Marlins are further out of it. Let's see, they're 15 games behind the Mets, so obviously not there. But they're also 5.5 out of the wild card. So they're like they're probably not making the playoffs this year.
Right.
But
they're
like,
improving though. They definitely improved last year.
Like, give a few of those guys like a couple more years. Like, that's going to be a really good team.
Yeah.
But like, at some point, you got to keep your young guys. If you keep flipping young guys to get more prospects, like you still got to wait for those prospects to develop in the league. And then it just kind of keeps the cycle going. I think that's part of the reason why you look at teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates. At one point, they've had Garrett Cole, they've had Clay Holmes, they've had all of these guys that are really, really good now. But like, they were so quick to just trade them away. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's if I was a fan of those teams, I'd be frustrated, really frustrated. But do the fans? Is the other question I'll ask you. Do the fans support them enough so that they can keep these guys and maybe sign them before they get into free agency? I've always been surprised. The Cleveland used to sell that place out when it first opened all the time, and then it started getting easy to get tickets there, if I remember right. And they've had good teams over the last few years. The Marlins, maybe Miami just isn't the place for Major League Baseball. It's weird now, but they really consistently haven't had a good team. The one time they tried to put something together and they signed Jose Reyes and they signed some players and they couldn't even hold on to them for a year, and when they've won these championships, they've disbanded the team very quickly, so I don't even know if, that Miami could support, a team down there. So if I'm a fan, I'm frustrated, but are the fans really supporting them?
I would say yes and no, because like here in Cleveland, it's all about the Browns.
Yeah.
Like Browns are number one. I would probably even say the Cavs are number two. Like there are still, like, I know of a few Guardians fans, but like even like asking some of the kids at the Learning Center, like, so like, do we have a baseball team here? Some of them don't even know.
Wow. And you've got a Hall of Fame manager who does a great job year in and year out with that team. They really haven't fallen totally off, like, and worst team in baseball, anything like that. They've always tried to at least maintain. And now you got something building there. Why would you trade a stud pitcher like that? You just build around him. Cincinnati, same thing. They're going to probably wind up trading Luis Castillo. Did you see him last night? He just was almost like he was showcasing himself, and that's probably a guy that the Yankees are probably going to land in, is what I'm thinking, because you imagine putting him on the Yankees. Oh my God. The Mets, so I think they'll shoot a little lower, maybe bring Brandon Drury back, but I mean, they already traded, Winker and Eugenio. They traded already almost their whole team. I mean, it's sad, and they can't draw. Cincinnati, when they were in Riverfront Stadium, and then when they first, opened this stadium, they used to sell out every night, and then they had something going with Dusty Baker, and they just never got quite over the hump. And now the fans just don't come out there either, which is really strange. But all right.
Yeah.
Juan Soto, what are you thinking? Where do you think he's gonna land? Again, we know nothing. We can only just go by what we read, right?
Yeah, I I thought there was an outside chance that he could end up with the Yankees.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's going to happen
Come
now.
on, man. I mean, come on. You want Juan Soto too? I mean, come on. Oh my gosh.
Well, I think at this point it doesn't make sense because where would he play? I
Yeah.
thought before the Benintendi trade there was a chance,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It kind of seems because I've heard this a few times and it kind of makes sense, and it would be a really good move for them. It seems like the St. Louis Cardinals would be a really good fit because they have a lot of good young players. They always seem to have good prospects.
Yeah.
So it kind of seems like that would be a really good fit. That's a scary team, though. Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, and Juan Soto all on the same
God.
team.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
wild. I would say probably there. I'll just say this on the Mets. I think the Mets could probably give the Nationals a good package, but I don't think the Nationals would want to trade in their own division and then have to deal with him for the next 10 years.
Yeah. I don't want the Mets to clean out their farm system to get him as good as he is. You know, it took the Mets a while, you know, to build their farm system back up. And, you know, it was no secret how they brought Omar Minaya back, you know, to kind of do that. And I don't think he's with them now, but he was for the last, 4 or 5 years or so to help build that farm system back up. And that's what he's really good at. Well, Juan Soto to the Cardinals probably makes the most sense. I got to tell you, man, like you said, that is a scary team if they get him, and they'll love him there. They'll love him there for the next, 10 years. That is just a tremendous, tremendous fan base, right? In St. Louis, they're not going to care how much the Bush family, opens up the vault to pay him.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys get traded there. They always seem to thrive. Over the years, whether it was, Jim Edmonds and Larry Walker, and they always seem to pick up, a veteran player that just starts out. Look at the year Arenado is having now, and Goldschmidt just picked up right where he left off in Arizona all those years. It's just, I think there's something about that atmosphere there. There's something about that ownership. It's such a well-run team. I mean, we were surprised when they fired the manager this past year because that's not something that they typically do. They typically hold on to their managers for a long time. Well, there's Whitey Herzog, Tony La Russa. Tony La Russa was there forever, even Mike Matheny was there for a long time. And so that's probably the most logical place. I'm wondering, is there a dark horse team like the Padres that will just empty it out for them? Because supposedly the Padres have quite the prospects, coming up as well.
I could see the Padres because especially you look at like where they stand. If they're gonna surpass the Dodgers, who right now have the best record in baseball, you have to make like a baller move like that. Now the Padres will probably make the playoffs this year. Like there really isn't a team that I think would knock them out of the wild card.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah, like a team like that. I don't know. Maybe a team like Seattle. They have young guys. They haven't made the playoffs in 2 decades. So
yeah. Well, that's a good one. I just think Seattle has the guy, man. They have their equivalent of Juan Soto with Rodriguez. I mean, I think he's the guy they build around, and they focus on signing him and keeping him long term. This whole Juan Soto thing, though, is just, we talked about it last week, so we don't have to go back to that. But there's just something there that we're totally missing that'll probably come out. And he seems to me, although I could care less for some of his antics on the field where he's staring at the pitcher, and I know it's all gamesmanship, but he seems to be a terrific young kid. I mean, think about it, he's only 23, and Eduardo Perez made this point when they were talking about it last night. Not only is he ultra talented and his numbers match up with some of the all-time greats in their first few years, but he delivered the few times he's been in the postseason. That didn't bother him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you'd get a guy, you put him on the Cardinals, you know they're going to be in the playoffs, but you get a guy that's going to deliver in the playoffs, man. That's an X factor there, you know. But he hasn't badmouthed this team, and maybe he will, maybe he won't, maybe he'll just, you know, just silently say, "Hey, I'm happy to be in St. Louis or San Diego or Seattle, wherever he lands." Um, I think it'll be bad if he doesn't get traded. You know, I think the second half of the year will be miserable for Washington. You know, but he doesn't seem like the guy that'll also pout. I think he'll go out and play hard every day. He just seems like a really, really good kid. You know, you take because he was very upset that got out, that he turned down that contract. You know, and a lot of baseball people peel the layers back and say, wait a minute, he wouldn't be the highest paid player. You know, it just seems like a lot of money because it's so many years. But per year, what did you say? You'd be like the sixth highest. I think you figured that out last week for us.
Something like that.
Something like that, you know. So anyway, I got to ask you this. I asked you this through text. Is there any way possible that the Angels trade Ohtani?
Well, I would say no, because to me that would be ridiculous. Like, you're talking about, you have an MVP, and I don't know. I did send you the thing about Trout, that he has apparently a rare back condition, so he might be fighting back issues the rest of his year. Horrible, or career. Horrible. But like, you look for a guy like Shohei Ohtani, a guy like, he is literally like a one of a kind type of player. Guy that can hit, a guy that can pitch. But like, even if you were to say, like, I'm looking for a pitcher like Ohtani, or I'm looking for a hitter like Ohtani, like, that's what you're looking for. There's, I think, only two reasons why I would say, yeah, trade him. If I'm getting back like multiple stars back. So I would hate this beyond belief if this happened, but let's just say, because this would kind of make a little bit of sense. Let's say you trade him to the Red Sox for Devers and Bogarts. Both guys aren't guaranteed to be here past this year. Like, okay, I could see something like that. Or like, maybe they just really don't think they can sign him long term. But like, to me, it's one of those things. So wait, like, how much do you want Ohtani? Okay, there you go. Like, it kind of seems like that would be the type of thing that he would get. Because like, if you remember, back when he was being posted or whatever, like that whole process, there was a lot of teams bidding on him.
Oh yeah.
And like, now that they've actually seen what he can do, like, if he hits free agency, like, you're talking probably 45-50 million a year for him.
I mean, you made a great point there, because some of these guys can be bust. You know, they're maybe good in Japan and they're terrible here in America. There's a lot of guys like that, but there's also the Matsuis and the Ichiros that lived up to every single height. This is a guy that lived up to it and more. And the two quick points I'll make on this is that, unlike the Marlins and unlike the Guardians, the fans come out for the Angels. I mean, they still, you know, tend to either sell that place out or have it at least 3/4 of the way full. And the other point is, when have we ever in our lifetime seen a player like this? I'll answer that. Never. You know, never. The last player like that was Babe Ruth. And so you go back to the 1920s, you know, and even Babe Ruth at some point gave up the pitching, right? And I mean, he's the most unique player in my lifetime. I've never seen a guy that could pitch this good and hit this good. I mean, it's just, and feels. I mean, it's unbelievable how talented he is, you know, and to even float his name out there. Now, listen, that team, even with these two transformational players, they're going nowhere. And it's head scratching. They'd probably be better off trading, you know, see what they can get for Syndergaard, you know, who obviously has proved that he could still pitch. You know, he comes back after 2 years out and he's doing well. Maybe, you know, a couple of their other players they can maybe see, but oh my gosh, I'd hang up the phone if somebody called me and say, hey, what do you want for Ohtani? Although what you just said, Devers and Bogarts, I probably would at least have to listen. If you threw in maybe 3 or 4 prospects and those 2 guys, I'd probably at least have to listen, but then I've got to sign those 2 guys, right? At the end of the year, I don't know. It's tough. You know. So anyway, let's jump into the Hall of Fame because it was a seemed to be a good ceremony. I didn't see. I just saw highlights myself of it. I want to start real quick, and then I really wanted you to talk a little bit about what you sent me about Barry Bonds, and we could talk about who do we think is getting in next year, because so obviously Big Papi got in. I thought well deserved. Again, he had the steroid thing hanging over his head, so we wasn't sure, but this guy is one of the best clutch hitters ever, and put up just tremendous numbers. Leader, and me, man, performed on the big stage year in and year out. I thought it was well deserved. Gil Hodges long overdue, because some of the things that you forget about Gil Hodges, he wasn't a great player, but he was the leader of those Brooklyn Dodger teams that finally broke through and won a couple of championships, and then certainly just what he did with the Mets in '69, and then how he tragically died. You just don't hear about stuff like that happening these days. A heart attack playing golf in spring training. It was just so shocking. I remember being only 11 years old, and I'm like, what the heck? The manager died. It was just unbelievable. I thought long overdue, but Tony Oliva is the guy I wanted to talk about real quick, because I know you love this stuff. So he played in that era where the pitchers just dominated. But I mean, I'm surprised he got overlooked for so long, because he didn't have those real big career stats in terms of the 3,000 hits and stuff like that. This was a guy, though, that was an unbelievable hitter for years. Now, he got hurt a couple of times, so he missed a couple of chunks of years in his career. But I want to read you some stats really quickly. In 1964 was his first big year. Kenny had 217 hits. He struck out only 68 times that year. He batted .323. He had 32 homers and 94 RBIs. In 1965, that was the year the Twins went to the World Series. They lost to the Dodgers that year. There was Sandy Koufax coming out party that year. He batted .321, 16 homers, 98 RBIs. Here's one that's going to blow you away. 1970. 1970, he had 207 hits. I'm sorry. He had 207 in 64. 217 in 64. He had 204 in 1970. He struck out 38 times. He struck out 38 times. He had 23 homers, 107 RBIs, and he batted .325 that year. So from 64 till about 73, he was just crazy consistent with 20, 25 homers, 90 to 100 RBIs, batted over 300 all those years. He was an 8-time All-Star. Now, in 1965, here's one of the blemishes on his career. He didn't have a good World Series. He only batted .192, and they needed him that World Series because they took the Dodgers to 7 games, and they lost in Game 7. Jim Cott had a really good World Series that year, but Oliva didn't. But in the 2 playoffs that he got into it, 69 and 70, the first Twins won the first Western Division in the first 2, and they faced the great pitching of the Baltimore Orioles. Both times he batted .385 in the ALCS. In 69, he batted .500. He was up 12 times. He got 6 hits. And he almost single-handedly tried to pull that playoff series out from the Orioles. And so he was just a great player. I was always surprised that he got overlooked. He was fast. He stole quite a few bases, but he hurt his leg and a couple of times, and that slowed him down. So he didn't have a very long career, say a solid 12 years. 10 out of those 12 years were just spectacular. I think he retired in 76. So they overlooked him for years and years, and now it's a Veterans Committee. He's 84 years old. And so think about that. If you ever think in your life that it's too late, 84 years old, he gets the call, hey, you're going into the Hall of Fame. So, so amazing. He was there. He had, his speech and everything like that. So really good moment. A player I remember relatively well. I don't obviously remember those seasons in the '60s, but I do remember him in those championship series. So now you pointed some stats that were unbelievable about Barry Bonds because this is going to have to start to come back up. They're off the regular ballot, right? Him and Roger Clemens. They spent their
Yeah.
10 years on there, and they're totally off the regular ballot. And I've taken up for Kurt Schilling a lot too. Is he off? Does he have one more year or he's off? That was his last year?
I have listed here. Let me double check. I think he's off.
He's off now. I think that's a travesty. I think that he definitely belonged in the Hall of Fame. Maybe the Veterans Committee will vote him in at some point too, because he obviously wasn't associated with steroids. It's just because he's a nut. That it can't be personal. Then take away their vote. It shouldn't be personal. There's a lot of things that he said. I scratched my head too, but when you look at what he did on the field, forget it. I mean, he didn't break any rules. He didn't, supposedly he didn't cheat or anything like that. I mean, the guy was just a big, big, big time pitcher. So anyway, Barry Bonds, talk to us.
All right, I saw this stat. I just thought it was interesting. So Barry Bonds in 2004 reached base safely 376 times, and he only had 373 at bats. Obviously, a lot of that is walks, but listen to this. He walked 232 times that year and only struck out 41 times.
My God.
Like, that is insane. Now, a lot of that is like, we're talking like peak Barry Bonds, where if there was a runner on base, you're intentionally walking him. Was it Buck Showalter that walked him with the bases loaded?
Yes. Yes.
So like,
yeah.
So like, you do have like some of those are intentional. I think, but still, I think it was only like about 100 or so. But we're still talking about a guy that reached base more than he had at bats. That is insane. And it's really interesting because, I do think eventually, I don't know about the Veterans Committee voting in Bonds and Clemens. I think that even more so than the writers, they tend to look very down on the steroids guys. Although maybe give it like 5, 10, 15 years where a lot of the Veterans Committee starts to become a little younger, maybe they might see it. Like, you get more of like your contemporary guys, like say your Chipper Joneses on that vote, things like that. Maybe you might see a little bit more movement where it's like, I faced Roger Clemens and that guy's a Hall of Famer. Like, maybe you might see a little bit of that. But I feel like, because even some of the Veterans Committee guys, they talk really bad about the steroid guys. So I'm curious there. But I have up here the projected 2023 ballot.
Yeah. Before you go into, I just got to say this real quick.
Yeah.
It pains me to say it because, again, he's not a very likable guy. Neither is Roger Clemens, by the way. Well, Roger Clemens is saying that, one of these networks should hire him because apparently, on his, I haven't seen it, but apparently on his appearances with Michael Kay and A-Rod, he's been really, really insightful. No doubt he knows the game,
Oh, yeah.
You could probably get Bonds to talk. Bonds just doesn't talk, but you could probably get him. He probably knows a lot about the game as well. But Barry Bonds, I'm going to say it. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I just, and so does Clemens. And I never liked Barry Bonds. I don't know why he's been so defiant on this. I don't know why he didn't just say what he did and just moved on. Maybe part of it was a legal thing, but those stats, like drawing those walks and stuff like that, the fact that he had such a good eye from a young age. Because I remember him in the late '80s when he came up with the Pirates. You had to throw him a strike in order for him to swing. It's like Juan Soto is now. None of that has to do with steroids. You know what I mean? And you can almost vote him in the Hall of Fame just based on that. So enough. I said it. I've been feeling this way for a few years now, but when you sent me that just confirms that, now he's his own worst enemy, but he should be in the Hall of Fame. So should Roger Clemens, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about A-Rod?
A-Rod's a little different because he did it twice. Him and Manny, didn't learn their lessons. I I don't know where the cutoff point is with A-Rod, right? He says when he was with Texas is when he started. And so did he put it together enough great years in Seattle and then the first year or two in Texas to warrant that? Manny, same thing. Manny doesn't talk about any of this. I think Manny was a similar hitter to Bonds, where he didn't strike out much at all, and he had a great eye. He was a student of the game, Manny. But where did he start? At least with Bonds, you kind of have that. Even though Bonds has never said this, you kind of have that 1998. That's when he started. So you look at his career before then. I don't know if you could do that so much with A-Rod or with Manny. Manny was a winning ball player too. I mean, the Indians went to the World Series a couple of times with him, and then obviously the championships with the Red Sox. It's hard. I don't know. I have to think about them a little bit more. But my initial reaction is no. Only because they're both two-time. It's like Robinson Cano. I can't vote for him now. And Robin Cano, without the steroids, should have been walk into the Hall of Fame. One of the best second basemen of all time. So
yeah.
Anyway,
I'll give three quick names that are on the ballot.
Yeah.
That I've been on, and then I don't know. There really isn't a standout first timer. There's a couple that I'll point out, and then you could just kind of rapid fire here. So first, Scott Rowland, 63% last year in his 6th year of eligibility. What do you think?
I've been a Scott Rowland fan for a long time, man. He was an excellent, consistent player. There's other guys though that you'd have, see, I compare him, even though he was a third baseman, and I'm comparing him to a second baseman. I'm comparing him to Jeff Kent because I thought that Kent was kind of a similar player, although Kent has an MVP, right? But they were just consistent year in and year out, and Kent didn't get in. So I think if you put Rowland in, you got to put in Kent. But I would vote for Scott Rowland. Yes.
Jeff Kent's in his last year of eligibility.
Yeah.
But he's only at 32%.
He's not getting in.
I'd be surprised.
He's not getting in. Yeah.
Next is Todd Helton, 52%. What do you think?
I would put Todd Helton in because, again, he's another guy. He was a throwback player. Left-handed hitter, always would get base hits to the opposite field. I don't care about the Coors Field stuff with him because he wasn't a big home run guy. He was just a big average guy. His career ended kind of abruptly, though, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But I thought he put together enough great years. And he was just a kind of a Keith Hernandez type fielder at first base. He was excellent. So I would put Todd Helton in, yes.
Next, Billy Wagner, 51% in his 8th year.
He's a tough one because he had some really good years with the Mets, but the closer still doesn't get the love that the starter gets. And Wagner was good for several teams, right? Astros, the Phillies, the Mets. I'm gonna pass though on Billy Wagner. Because I don't think during his and this is something that's a gauge, right? And I'm going to use it more with closers. I don't think he was the best closer of his era. I think there were other guys that were a little bit better than him, even back then. I thought Scott Rowland, you could have put in top 2 or 3 third basemen while he played. Jeff Kent, same way. Todd Helton, definitely. Billy Wagner was maybe 4th or 5th of his peers at that time.
Yeah. All right, let's look at a few first timers. We'll start with this guy because I would say out of the first timers, he's got the biggest shot. And that's your boy Carlos Beltran. Notice I'm not taking ownership of him because I still don't like him as an announcer.
Yeah, but he had a good how many years he played with the Yankees? A year or two?
Yeah, 2.5.
I'm going to say yes. Listen, if you compare his stats as a switch hitter, he compares to Mickey Mantle and Eddie Murray. He's one of the best switch hitters of all time. And if you look at what he did in the postseason with the Astros, that year. And then he was always clutch, so I'm going to say yes. I think that I think Beltran, and again, you look at center fielders of his era, he was a great fielder, not good. He was great in center field. I think in his era, right, he was maybe a notch, definitely a notch below Andrew Jones, but nonetheless, he was an excellent center fielder, consistent. A winning ball player. I say yes. And you had the switch hitting in there. I say yes.
Yeah. I'm not even going to really look at a lot of these other guys because they all kind of seem like they're the Hall of really good. Last one I'll add because I think it'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez. What do
Oh
you think?
boy. No. Um, I'm curious on what you think. Um, but I'll give my reason real quick. I think again, not long enough, and I'm gonna use the same thing with Billy Wagner. Um, Although K-Rod has a little advantage from early in his career and the postseason, that he had with the Angels that year that they won it. But I think that K-Rod kind of faded in and back out. Faded out then back in. He inconsistent in his career, I thought, but I also thought that he went through a probably 5, 6, 7 year period where I don't think he was the best closer of his era. He was up there. Now listen, he had after that World Series, he had a couple of just unbelievable years. 50 something saves, and I think he had 1 year with, did he have 50 something saves and no blown saves?
Something like that.
I just think he didn't do it long enough. And I hate that I'm doing that with the closers, because K-Rod was important on a few teams. He was important on the Met team too. But I just I don't know. He doesn't scream Hall of Famer to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, I think he was really good. 1 year, 2008, his last year with the Angels, he had 62 saves.
Yeah,
which is wild.
I may have to think about that one a little bit because those years with the Angels might get him in. You have his stats with the Angels after, what was it, 2002? He came up, right? And then what did he do those next 5, 6 years?
Start with 2004. 182 ERA, 12 saves, 84 innings. So it seems like he was more of a setup guy then.
Right?
Yeah. In 2005, he had a 267 ERA, led the league with 45 saves. 2006, 173 ERA, 73 innings, led the league with 47 saves, led the majors, it looks like, actually. 2007, in 67 innings, had 40 saves. And then in 2008, he had an ERA of 2.24 with 62 saves. In 2009, his first year with the Mets, in 68 innings, he had 35 saves, 3.71 ERA, so not great. 2010, with 25 saves and 57 innings, looks like he was probably hurt. 2.20 ERA. That's a pretty decent stretch, but you said, I don't think it's long enough.
Yeah, that 2008 season, oh my gosh, 62 saves. Wow. I mean, that's just hard to fathom. He had a rubber arm too until he got hurt. And then he had the whole weird incident where he beats up his father-in-law and they lock him into jail overnight. I mean, has that ever happened to a player? I mean, let's put it in perspective. He beats up his father-in-law and his father-in-law is almost twice his age. And he beats him up in the stadium. So the stadium police arrest him. And I didn't realize this, so I had no reason to realize this. That most of these stadiums are equipped with an actual jail. And so he gets thrown in after he plays that night. He gets thrown in jail for the night, doesn't leave till the morning, till a judge comes in and lets him go. It was just so weird, and he was never really the same after that. But I'm going to say no, but those seasons with the Angels caused me I would consider him, but I don't think so.
Also, 62 saves is the single season record. I just looked up. Number 2 on that list is your boy again, Edwin Diaz. In 2018, he had 57.
Edwin Diaz has been just, I'm keeping my fingers crossed he stays like this, man. He's just been unbelievable. You saw him the other night. I mean, he just, that slider now that he's went back to throwing is just, it's devastating because then he throws 100 on the, with the fastball. He's just been spectacular. You know, he's going to be the X factor as well going into the playoffs here. So the Hall of Fame, interesting. Let me ask your opinion on this real quick. Big Papi, I never got really your opinion on it. Hall of Fame deserving or no?
Yeah, I would say so. Probably if you could argue either him or Edgar Martinez, best DH of all time.
Yeah.
Super clutch in the postseason. I also think he was really big to the city of Boston too. I think of his famous speech right after the bombing. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. And do you think now the Hall of Fame voters are past the whole stigma they had with the DH? Because it took them a long time to get Edgar Martinez in there, who I thought was deserving a long time ago. And Edgar Martinez was a really good fielding third baseman until he hurt his leg. He started playing DH only because, you know, he had a bad injury.
Yeah, I think that they're past that. Kind of like in a few years, like some of the guys that are like, let's say if Barry Bonds was on the ballot 10 years from now, I would probably say he would probably make it. I think that they're easing up on, like, because I thought they saw the DH as just half a position. Now, especially nowadays, especially for older players, it seems like it's a lot more respected.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah, because the DH used to be someone at the tail end of their career. You know, they buy themselves a couple more years by just DHing. You know, it's not like that anymore. And all right, so as we wind down here, I have a question for you. And next week we never did do our number 1 best sports moment of all time. So why don't we build that up? We hype it up. It's next week. We'll do that next week. So your mom brought this up. I thought it was pretty interesting as she's watching a few seconds of the game with me there, and she seemed, you know, they're spanning the crowd, and everybody's eating ice cream and stuff like that. And so my question to you is, what is, when you go to a ballpark, your favorite go-to snack? And I have another question behind that.
I would probably say like a hot dog or a sausage.
A hot dog or a sausage. Okay. That's good. And so my question behind that is, do you do that? Like, how often have you gone and that whole snack is done before the first inning even starts?
Oh, probably about at least half the time.
Yeah. Why do we do that? Because we do that at the movies too, right? Do you ever notice you go to the movies, all you hear people crunch on popcorn before the movie starts, and then it's over. By the time the movie starts, there's no more popcorn. There's nothing. Why do we do that?
I don't know. I think we're just so excited about it, but then when the stuff actually starts, we're like really into it. So
no, we're into the game. So a hot dog or a sausage. See, I thought you would have said like Cracker Jacks. You got to go Cracker Jacks, right?
Oh well, yeah. That's a good point.
And then you're like me. We never wanted to get up like during the game. You know, it's like, so we always would get our snacks before the game. Now sometimes, you know, we'll buy, but you know, over the years you have less and less cash on you. You know, the vendor, I guess, are there vendors now that probably take credit cards? I don't know.
I would assume so, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think you have to sit down like in the, you know, field level seats, and they have, I think they go around, they electronically take your order, and you could probably order it with a credit card. But I think if you're sitting, you know, up top, you still got to hand the guy like a $5 bill, and that's not even enough for one hot dog, you know. So
yeah,
it's important. Now, so I'll ask this last question because I have an answer for me. It's weird. I don't think I ever told you this, but what ballpark? We've been to several ballparks now. What ballpark has the best food? Because these days they've really hyped it up. You know, you got Chick-fil-A in stadiums. You know, you got Shake Shack in Citi Field. You know, what's your favorite favorite stadium for food?
Um, if I don't know, that's a toughie. I would maybe say Baltimore. Um, or
Or you spilled the
or
drink on that guy's back?
yeah, or Progressive Field. Progressive Field does have good
Okay.
food.
Okay. Yeah, we kick over the drink. Poor Caleb. And then the guy didn't accept the apology. I mean, come on,
Yeah,
we all three of us said we were sorry, and he's still like all grumpy about it. Come on. It was like it was
right.
100 degrees out there that day. That was gonna dry in a second,
Yeah,
whatever moisture got on your back was gonna dry in a second. Listen, I had a couple of hot dogs at the old Turner Field when I was working, and I went to see the Mets and the Braves. Sat there by myself, had really good seats too. Sat there by myself in my Mets stuff. I went 2 nights that week. I couldn't wait to go back that second night to get those hot dogs. I don't know what it was about them. They were so good. So it was like the Turner Field hot dogs. I have no idea. I don't think they're famous for that. All right, I'm
yeah.
turning on the music. Take us home, Ken.
All right, this is Kenny Squared End
Kenny,
with sports on the positive tip. We will see you guys next week.
absolutely.